This is Talking Hardcore, the podcast for people who love hardcore history.
You study history because it allows us to understand the present and prepare for the future.
I'm not trolling.
And I love it.
I'm just pointing out where they're wrong.
The Talking Hardcore podcast is presented by Ace Industrial Solutions. Are you in need of skilled trade professionals for your next project? Look no further. Specializing in commercial and industrial buildouts, floor coatings and coverings, high-speed concrete polish, floor cleaning, shot blasting, painting, energy efficiency, and pallet racking. With a proven track record of excellence, they have become the industry leader. To find out more, please check the link in the description. You're watching Talking Hardcore. I'm George.
I'm Scott.
And we're here again with the author, Matt Bella. And we're going to do hardcore history episode, Nazi Tidbits, today. So we're going to just break down thoughts that occurred to us during that episode. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. Also, we did move the book club event. Take a look for that. The Faithful Executioner, we will be having that soon. And if you want to get the audio book and or the Kindle book or the hard copy book, if it's the Stone Ages where you are, you could actually read it in paper, and that would be weird, right? And then
Scott like paper.
and then join us in the book club event. It's an interesting read. I'm most of the way through it now, and it's actually really, really useful. Don't you think, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And all right. So Nazi Tidbits. We're going to go ahead and have Scott kick us off with his German accent. Oh wait. Also, check out the presenting sponsor, Ace Industrial Solutions, and the link in the description. All right,
guys, they do all kinds of stuff.
Yep. Go ahead.
So, what I found very interesting when it comes to Nazi tidbits was when Dan Carlin was speaking to his professor, and they were talking about American fascism versus how fascism would come to America and how it'd be American fascism.
Right.
All right, now I'm going to switch that.
Yeah, because we can't talk the whole time, and that'll drive me nuts.
Which is interesting because no matter what side of the aisle you're on politically, at least here in the U.S., everybody thinks everybody else is a fascist.
Yeah.
Or at least they call each other fascists.
And communist, which is funny.
Yeah.
And everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
So,
let's recap the episode real quick.
sure.
Okay. Hardcore History Nazi Tidbits is episode 15, I believe. 14 or 15 of
my God.
Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. In that episode, it's only an hour long. He just
16, by the way.
Episode 16, thank you. He just gets into his thoughts about Hitler and the Nazis and how crazy improbable their rise to power was. Like all the really weird little things that had to happen for them to actually gain power in Germany, and then they all did, to the whole world's detriment. So that was the focus of the episode. And in the one point in this episode, he talks about when he was in school and he had this professor and they were talking about Hitler and what he was saying, and basically his spiel to the German people and how they bought in. And Dan said his classmates this was in college, they were kind of laughing. Like
that fascism could...
That anybody would believe that.
Yep.
Right? And that's when the professor said what you said.
Yep, it'd be American fascism.
He said fascism takes the personality of the culture,
of
the
an organism that adapts to its environment, right?
Right. It kind of is, right?
Well,
So,
I mean,
yeah.
go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, Dan starts this episode with a very interesting question: why do we find the Nazis so fascinating? And then he really dives into a lot of the history, like you're saying. And to me, it's really like Ghosts of the Ostfront, the prologue, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's exactly right.
Well, and why wouldn't it be I mean, I would say it's fascinating because you take a downtrodden society, like at the ends of World War I, everything went into complete chaos. So there's no longer a monarchy where you have a czar, or I'm sorry, Kaiser running the country,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then all of a sudden you have political systems that weren't It wasn't a monarchy anymore. So you have a society in complete disarray, and then everybody's vying for power, and then Hitler and his
Cronies.
cronies ended up seizing power through, I think it was the National Socialist Party,
German Workers' Party, the National
German
Socialist
Workers.
German Workers'
Yeah.
Party. Yeah.
Yep, and he won an election that was anyway. Yeah, we don't need to get into all those details. Let's get into our thoughts on it.
Well, still, the election's important because he won the election with 33% of the vote.
Right.
Because there were so many factions and so many parties vying for power.
Right.
So with a 33% vote, he wins.
Right.
It was close with it was close with the communists, and so just there's been some revisionist stuff recently with an excellent. Well, I'm gonna call it an excellent series without actually having read it. The Hitler Years by Frank McDonough. He was actually he was recently a guest on Dan Snow's History Hit, and they did a 3-part series about the rise and fall of the Third Reich and all these trends and forces that we're talking about. And he talks about the election specifically, and he's like, Hitler really won in the rural regions. He didn't really win with the industrialists first, even though he was cozying up to them as a political candidate. He's like, look, I'm going to rebuild the economy. I'm going to between you and me, I'm going to rebuild the military. Just don't tell anybody. So you're going to have plenty of work for your guys. You know what I mean? So there was that going on, but his base was actually more rural, according to McDonough, which is interesting.
Well, and I think the rise and fall of the Third Reich, the book that came out in the late 50s, early 60s.
I've read that book probably 50 times, man.
Right. Awesome, by the way. And
check it out.
he talks about in there how similar to what you're saying, though, right? The industrialists, they kind of came over after he was already picking up steam. They already had all their propaganda department and everything, and he was able to just convince them, but it wasn't like those were his base.
Well, don't forget brown shirts, like literally beating people, like rioting in the streets.
Sure.
Yeah, you have to think of the industrialists as being very much old school, and they were probably more tied to and relying on the stability of a monarchical system, like they had prior to that, or the old school presidential system. And then here comes this young upstart with his radical ideas, and they're like, okay, let's see where this goes. But yeah, as far as the downtrodden people, how about a downtrodden person? It is a micro and macrocosm of the entire situation, the Weimar Republic, where you have literally a tramp, a vagabond, a destitute person, a guy who says, I refuse to get a job because I am going to be a famous artist. He is recruited into the military, and then he serves with distinction, even though he never rises above the rank of corporal. And in the McDonough history, there's some delving into his military record, and it's like he wasn't even really a corporal. He was just kind of a special private because he couldn't even get that high. But he did serve with distinction, and as far as your point, George, the funny little things that happened for this to happen along the way, surviving not just the war, but actually like very specific incidents that could have killed him, coming out, being assigned by his own military to investigate these political groups, finding one, being approached by one at that meeting, deciding to join it, finding the leadership of this party to be a bunch of stuffed shirts, saying, I can do better than this. He always had a gift for gab, right? He was always a politician. Prior to that, he had been a homeless person, but in the tramp houses, he would expound at length upon political issues, found a home in the military, excelled there, came out, was a spy for the military, found a group that he liked that he could manipulate, right? If he had been assigned to just some other group that day, history would have changed. McDonough is saying that the trends and forces at work would have caused a Second World War anyways, and it was a very close thing between between the communists and the other parties at work there. So if you remove National Socialism as Hitler's party from that equation, because let's just say he never rose to that power,
right,
then it would have been the communists plus other things at the time. And there was a huge
you might
tension
not have got
in
a
the
Holocaust.
I don't think you would have got a Holocaust. I don't think the Jews would have been so specifically targeted. I mean,
like if World War II was just a normal war, instead of a war of extinction in the East, and a war of extinction of the Jews and gypsies and all the other peoples, that changes world history tremendously.
Well, I disagree with that. I disagree with that because Stalin was also targeted groups that he thought weren't.
But he wasn't the one running for office in Germany.
I understand.
Stalin had his own concentration camp system, and there was very much a racial targeting of people. And in this alternate history scenario, if the communists won in Germany, we still might have got aggressive expansion into Poland. That kicks in the alliance with Britain. Britain goes to war in Europe. America follows them in. Now we're at war with Russia in Europe.
I think that's 100% possible. I just don't think you would have seen the type of willpower, manpower put into the Holocausting like the Germans.
The Holocaust, as we know it, obviously would not have existed.
I mean, that was just an extreme amount of manpower they put into that to the detriment of their war.
I understand.
And Dan talks about that. It's a very important point. So after Scott, I'd like to hear what Scott has to say. But then, that's definitely something to follow up on.
Well, I mean, but once again, and this is something that's been brought up to me in several different conversations. Doesn't matter with who, but Stalin overnight, within 24 hours, rounded up all the people that he thought did not belong in Russian society, and then basically put them all on trains and shipped them to Siberia, and then dropped them off and said, "Okay, survive." And they were Jews, they were gypsies, they were Jews, gypsies, Romanians, or if you want to call gypsies Romanians, or however you want to.
Right.
Anyway, any person that he thought did not belong in that society or in communist society, he shipped to Siberia and just said, "Okay, survive," and just left people.
There is a very hard question to ask here. One, both the Nazis and Soviet Russia under Stalin used people like Jews as slave labor. Okay. Now, two, the Holocaust, was it merely a problem of overstock? At a certain point, did you just need to kill them because you couldn't put them anywhere? That's absolutely true. They tried to ship them off to Madagascar. They tried to give them to every other country in the world, and nobody would take them. There's a book written about it called the abandonment of the abandonment of the Jews. So let's say Stalin. Let's say the communists win in Germany. Stalin takes that. Obviously, it would have become a furtherance of the USSR. Yeah, at that point. So all those policies are enacted there. Now you're shipping all these people out of your society that you don't want. Now the Soviet Union has more territory in which to place their slave labor. So the Gulag archipelago might not have become so overcrowded as to require something like an Auschwitz.
Gas chambers.
Would it still have happened? Because at a certain point, did the Germans really just want to kill the Jews, or did they want to get rid of them? Now,
I think it became a thing where once they started with the mass murdering, though, they didn't turn it off. Even when it made sense to turn it off, they didn't turn it off.
Very, very important. And let's talk about that really quickly, because the trains kept running to the concentration camps when the resources were needed for the war effort, and they were losing the war. There's a huge question there. And Dan drills down on this, and it's a big thing. There's a whole book written about it called Understanding Hitler. Did he really believe his own hype? Did he really believe that the Jew? Yeah. Did he really hate the Jews, or was it a political tool? Or at a certain point, do you just say it enough to where you have to keep going with it and you believe it?
But he wrote Mein Kampf while in prison, and that was
the only thing I believe out of Mein Kampf. The only thing I believe out of Mein Kampf is that he intended to invade the East. That's the only thing I believe.
But the reasoning behind invading the East, I believe, right? Like
was
we need land to make more Germans, right? So we got to kill them. But I think this is a note I made to myself, actually. So it's like most people most conquerors or tribal wars, right? They're gonna say, well, that other, they're evil. They're the ones causing all the problems. We need to fight them, and we need to get rid of them because we'll be safe then, right?
So this is
well, one second. So that's not even the main point. So, but that is, I think for most times in history, that is a convenient excuse, right? But I don't know that it was with Hitler. I feel like at least by the end, he actually did believe his own stuff. And maybe he did from the jump, because the whole idea of the Jews and getting rid of them the way he did was really not something you would see in most nations. Even racist, old school racist, terrible places, they wouldn't have got rid of the useful ones. They wouldn't have scared off the useful ones.
The
They would
nuclear
have made
scientists.
exceptions. Yeah, I mean, you would have kept the rocket scientists. You would have kept
Albert Einstein.
Einstein. You would have kissed his ass to keep him while you were making
That's a good point.
second-class citizens out of the other ones. That's what people usually do,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? But Hitler didn't do that.
No. So
Right.
That's why
I think he bought it. I really do.
Hmm.
And then so that brings me to another thing that Dan talks about in this episode, though, right? How Hitler wanted to get back to this pagan German, which
Exactly.
so
That's what I was going to
topical.
say. Yeah, he really does think that Hitler believed in it because it was imperative to the nation, the national purity of his grand ideal and his vision for the future of Germany. Yeah.
Well,
so you have
if
to
you
get
read
rid
Roman
of all the
history,
Jews. Mhm.
right? You read the Roman history, then you listen to Twilight of the Azirs, okay,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Thor's Angels, and you realize what kind of badass people those Germans were that Hitler's talking about, right? Those are the ones that the Romans couldn't conquer, right? They gave up. They finally just said, okay, that's far enough. We're not going to go further. We've went far enough. We're not going to keep
We're not gonna
going into
cross the
these
Rhine.
deep woods and try to conquer these crazies, you know. And Charlemagne fought them for centuries, or not centuries. He fought them for decades, right?
Hmm.
Those German people were very uncooked, right? And then you listen to Dan talk about how Hitler really did want to get back to pagan Germans instead of Christian Germans. And that's when it popped in my head when I was listening to that again today. I was like, he wanted to uncook them.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
He wanted to get back to the way they were before civilization.
Remove the invading influence from their society, their genealogy, and
Mhm.
their mythology. Yeah.
And the
right
way
on.
he described that was with Christianity, because it was infected by Judaism.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And you know what? That's an interesting way to think about it, because you can also really do see a civilizing aspect of Christianity.
You do, and we talked about that in the Aesir,
Exactly.
and you couple that with the fact that the November criminals, right? The people who surrendered
Mhm.
Germany, Hitler's breaking moment when he wept into his pillow in the hospital bed at the aid station after he'd been gassed with
Mhm.
mustard gas, and his epiphany that he would then enter politics. Like, a lot of these people were associated with being Jews who betrayed their own country, and his sense of national pride was tied up with the betrayal of this perceived offender race of the Jews in their society. So if you love this
Mhm.
country and the Jews betrayed it, then he's going to hate the Jews. And you don't need anything more than that to understand why you would initially build a platform on that, which worked perfectly well with the society at the time. It was suffering in the
Yep.
privation of the Weimar Republic. Everyone could tie into that. And that was just the political stuff. There is the ages old anti-Semitism that goes back in Europe for, nobody needed help providing that. That's something else can be tied into, galvanized and harnessed. And then at the end of the war, they're losing the war for real. But the war against the Jews, these helpless people who have been so brutalized and victimized and captured and persecuted and hunted in the woods and slaughtered, this is a war you can still win. And they were still winning that war all the
That's
way
a
up
good way
until
to
the
think of
last day
that.
of the war.
Yeah. Well, in fact, they kind of accelerated some of the exterminations.
They did, and they're
If I
like, let's
remember
just fucking
correctly.
get it done. I'm sorry about the F-bombs, but yeah, they're just like,
No,
let's
you're
just get it
fine.
done.
I've decided that I'm not beeping them out. If anybody
Right on,
is
man, right
listening
on.
to this with kids
There's an
in the
amazing
car, I do
movie.
apologize, but we're gonna say fuck once in a while.
There's an
just-
amazing.
I can't help it.
There's an amazing movie called Conspiracy, and it's only about an hour long because it was a BBC TV movie, but it's excellent. It stars Kenneth Branagh as the guy who was the governor of Czechoslovakia under the Nazis, who was later assassinated. which is depicted in another excellent film called Anthropoid, starring Cillian Murphy of Oppenheimer fame, which I highly recommend. It's about the Czechoslovakian special operations guys who parachute back into their own country and assassinate the Nazi governor.
That's sweet,
dude. They end up get holed up in a church, and it's a true story. Very, very, very good depiction of the historical events.
Wow!
But in this movie called Conspiracy, it's about the meeting that was held, and I think it was probably about it was really when the Holocaust was beginning to ramp up, and they were switching from bullets to gas vans to actually building the gas chambers. And this meeting happened. I believe it happened in Eastern Europe, and it was the Nazi governor. It was Adolf Eichmann. It was all, and then you'd have like a representative of the SS, and then this branch of the government, and an attorney or a judge who's determining the legality of your status as a German citizen by your association, 1/4 Jew and all that kind of stuff. And they sat down at the table and they worked out the practicalities of the Holocaust. It is the most dry, professional, banal, and organized preparation for genocide. And that's how the only way I can. I really entreat everyone to check it out. And the way that they're talking about this, it touches upon some of these points. It's really just a movement of resources and materials. They're like, we can't take them. No one else will take them. We have to get rid of them. Here's how we're going to do that. And just folks out there listening, we're talking about some hard stuff. Okay. Like, this is a very serious topic, and there is absolutely no support for the Nazi side of things in any of this. But when we're talking about the singularity of Hitler that Dan is trying to evaluate, there are words like charisma that arise. If you ask me why I think people are so fascinated with the Nazis, I think that 1,000 years from now, you're looking back at the metadata of history, and if everything goes according to plan with our civilization now as far as peace, you will see that as the last great conquest, right? Who's the last guy who tried to take over the world? Hitler. Okay, tell me about that guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
and he did it with video. And that's the other reason
that's
there's
a
fascination
very good
with
point.
Hitler.
Yeah.
There's no video of Genghis, or we'd all be watching that shit constantly.
Or Alexander.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or Caesar.
There's records. Oh
There's
my God.
records, but and we pour over that stuff. We read that stuff. Imagine if you could go watch Julius Caesar speak.
It would change you. It would change your life. You'd understand this.
Different.
And to hear Hitler speak, you need to understand German, and you also need to be a person at that time who is pissed off at the state of your society.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I think that people are fascinated with, the Third Reich and Nazi Germany, I think the martial order, law and order that came with it is what intrigues a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Because you think about,
it was chaos for a long time.
Oh,
good point.
Sure, but if I told you like the entire Nazi party or the Nazi government was like an extension of the military, and that's how I would envision it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I would assume that
they were certainly paramilitary. I mean, they had the brown shirts, and then they had the SA for a while.
Yeah, and you mean once they got power?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's what fascism is, right?
When people are what they're fascinated about, I think that's one of the main reasons is so you had martial law and order within the country. You had
So you mean people nowadays? That's what fascinates them?
Yeah. Like when they said, "Oh, if you put a swastika on a book, you're going to get 10."
God, that struck me. That stuck out to me so hard in that episode. You get a 30% bump in your book sales if there's a swastika on the cover.
And that's true. I'm sure that's true.
Which is crazy because that wasn't even.
But it's not people buying it because they're Nazis,
right? They're fascinated
with
that period in history.
Genuinely fascinated with that area in history.
Sure. Yeah,
and there's a lot of reasons for that. And I think you might be partly right on that, Scott. To me, I don't think it's the martial aspect, though. I think it's the fascinating thing about it is the story. How unlikely it was that Hitler was who he was and would gain power. How quickly he did it.
Yeah.
And then what he did with it when he did it, which was just bananas. Wiping through France. Okay, that's nuts. right there, nuts.
Sure.
Okay,
Going around the measure.
and then like surprise attack on the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. That's nuts. All right. And he almost pulled it off. If he was just a little bit better of a leader, better of a general, he would have actually probably pulled it off.
If he would have stuck to the plan, he'd have pulled it.
Yeah, if he'd have let his generals lead and stopped interfering, they probably would have won. And that's insane to think about.
There's also commentary on this from McDonough in that Dan Stone's History Hit series about the exact details of how the generals didn't trust him until his ideas came through in France and this and that, and then they went whole hog on Operation Barbarossa. Mm-hmm. But maybe we can get into that in the Ghost of the Ostfront episode. But I think the important part here is the unlikeliness of all this happening. I mean, Hitler himself survived not only the First World War as a person who was, going up to the front lines as a messenger, and sometimes a messenger is more dangerous, but also several incidents that should have killed him, right? Like moving out of the way right before an artillery strike. As in the unlikelihood of his rise to power, him being in that place, and the particulars, and then
or the assassination attempts,
multiple assassination attempts, right? The man. If you're looking at this from the zoomed out, weirded out, religious, mythological wackadoodle aspect, it's very easy to see in the terms of like mythology, man. I mean,
if I believed in angels and demons, I would clearly think he was possessed by a demon.
And Dan even talks about it in this episode. He says some of my friends who refer to the God of history say that he must have been there at this time in that place.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Okay. One more thing popped up to me that I thought was a fascinating angle that Dan talked about here. Okay. He talked about how Hitler was focusing on the problem with the Germans was genetic, so the solution needed to be genetic, okay? So he started off with this idea, well, we're going to breed the best possible Germans with the other best possible Germans and make more good possible Germans. And then we're going to do all these other things, remove these unwanted people from society. And a thought popped into my head when he said that, right? I'm like, well, what would have happened if Hitler would have just been playing the long game? Instead of invading France when he did, or at least instead of invading Russia when he did, if he actually continued out with his genetic breeding
and martial training of the population,
I mean, he could have built Germany into a fucking powerhouse. I mean, they kind of were. But if he was just better or smarter with that kind of power, imagine what they would have been like. Imagine what Genghis would have done. But anyway, the genetic part was what I was thinking about.
So breeding them out, I mean, takes longer.
That would work.
I think the humans. Yeah. I was. There was about to be some reference to prehistory, which is probably grossly offensive. Slowly breeding out the Jews from Germany. Just very clearly, if Hitler had never invaded another country, he would have gone down in history as one of the greatest leaders in world history, right?
Oh, I don't mean never either. I honestly just mean, what if he just bought himself 30 years?
Well, bought himself 30 years. So could
did the things he wanted, because he had these long-term plans, right?
Right,
exactly.
He did.
But he had long-term plans to be the best, but those weren't going to kick in fast.
He says that, and it's in his. And I just need to back up and say that I just said something nice about Hitler and fuck Hitler. So so very clearly,
there's the short right there. There's the short right there. I'm just gonna back this up. You're gonna say something nice about Hitler. Fuck Hitler.
You have to do like
that one's going viral.
The Saving Private Ryan line. Fuck Hitler. Fuck Hitler.
Fuck Hitler. Betty Boop. What a dish.
Nice Kens.
So in John Toland's definitive biography of Hitler, he talks about this specifically. Okay, so Hitler tried to get first he tried the beer hall push, and that failed. That was supposed to be his. He got the Nazi party, he built it up. Okay, we're going to march on the government because his idol was Mussolini, and Mussolini marched on Rome, and it worked. Hitler marched on Berlin, and it didn't work, right? Okay, so he was set back.
He goes to jail for like 2 years.
Right, that was supposed to be his immediate leap to power. He went to prison, and then he had to do this long. It was actually a long campaign where he flew all around the country and built up his support base. And during that time, he said, I have so little time left. Like he was always saying, like, if this hadn't happened, I would have so much more time. Now I need to accelerate my program. And you can plug that into his whole policy, which is why maybe he didn't wait so long to do the things that he had planned.
Charge.
That's why he had to do it. He knew he didn't have much more time. He was already in his 40s, and he was
just because he was worried about living long enough.
Yeah, that's it. He had a plan. It got set back, and he had to accelerate all of his plans.
Now, one thing you said, George, with Hitler's plan to breed out.
I didn't mean breed out.
Hold on.
That's not what I meant.
What echoes of our conversation with the communist Josh Dwyer came right back to me, where he's like, "Oh, we're going to breed out this kind of behavior out of the community," and it's just not possible.
But that's not what I was talking about.
No, I understand what you mean.
What I mean is, if you wanted to make bigger, stronger soldiers,
sure,
it legit would work if you just bred the biggest, strongest people with each other and then raised them up, brainwashed into your system.
But you don't.
That you're going to get fucking super soldiers if you take 20 years to do it. 30 years, you will get those.
But you don't always want the biggest, strongest guy on the front line. You want the smallest, fastest guy.
Sometimes, but you can breed for those too.
Yeah,
if you're doing this intelligently, there's no reason you can't do that, just like you can breed a dog species.
Well, I mean, like, if you look at special forces like Navy SEALs, Delta Force, none of those, I mean, some of those dudes are big, but a lot of those guys just don't have the stamina to keep up.
My buddy who was in the Marines said that none of the big guys made it over the obstacle courses.
Right.
They won't.
Right. But are you looking different soldiers for different types of soldiers for different types of things?
And they would have adapted. So let's remember, folks, this is the age of eugenics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
terrible. And I'm going to go on the record first before I get accused of this. Not pro eugenics.
Yeah. No CRISPR around here.
I am not. I'm anti CRISPR too. I do not think we should be fucking with any of this stuff. Right.
Breeding humans like animals to bring out certain traits.
But I do think that would work. I just don't think it's right. I don't think it's okay. I think it's wrong, and we shouldn't do it. But I think it would work.
There's a movie that you guys should watch. It's called Soldier with Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah.
Kick-ass movie, but same thing. So you get into like eugenics, where they were breeding like the best soldiers, or they're using whatever. The very first soldiers were born that way, okay?
Right?
But they were using like the best military DNA.
Right.
And then as the future progressed, then they were starting to splice DNA and different different key benefits.
See, I'm just thinking about it athletically.
No, I gotcha. I'm just
and honestly too, think about it like this: what if you just took and only bred the smartest people?
Sure.
How fascinating would that be to see what would happen?
How are you determining that, though? Let's go back to eugenics, okay? So,
right. No, I don't think it's okay. Again?
No. It's not about okay or not. It's about what we are determining to be intelligent and all this kind of stuff.
Like, okay, so if you give an IQ test, and maybe this isn't say only breed this, but say you just had a program where the smartest chicks and the smartest dudes had kids, okay? And repeated that for 40 years, 50 years. What would you come up with?
Well,
now you get regression.
But no, just because you have two smart people breeding doesn't mean their offspring is going to be smart.
Right.
It doesn't even. It's not even a high. The chances are higher odds.
Yes, way higher.
Because they're not.
Yes, they are.
They are not.
You're wrong.
I'm telling you, they're
nope.
not.
I will tell you the statistics here. How this works is two very smart people are likely to have smart children. They're just more likely to be less smart than the parents.
Maybe.
But they're still going to be smarter than average. Very high chance they're smarter than average. There's a regression to the mean. But then you apply that over generations and you lose that regression because then you slowly are going up. It's like, okay, so two tall people are likely to have a tall kid. It's just if those parents are above average tall, that kid is likely to be less tall than the parents, but taller than average. And you see this all the time when one great athlete marries another great athlete and they have kids. Turns out those kids are usually great fucking athletes.
Now,
that shit's genetic.
Is that nature or nurture?
Oh, it's definitely nature.
You think so?
Yes. No, athletics. A lot of that is fast twitch muscles. That shit you got to be born with. And that's the same thing up here.
Intelligence does not work that way.
I disagree. If you got fast twitch brain muscles, I bet that helps.
Then show your work. I mean, show me the word. I want to see the evidence.
Well, I will. I mean, we can look this up sometime and pull up studies, but I mean, I've read about because IQ is something that is hereditary. It just is. And that's not to say that it's only hereditary. Okay. Dumb people can have smart kids. Smart people can have dumb kids.
Yep.
Okay. But on average,
it's a crapshoot.
It's hereditary.
I'm telling you.
Smart people are more likely to have smart kids than dumb people. It's just a fact. That's just how genetics works. You get your DNA from your parents. Now,
this concludes the speech by George in defense of his rejection of eugenics.
Yeah, I'm still against eugenics. I just don't think that necessarily they were wrong that genetics works the way it does.
Well, now one thing I want to throw out there, and I've mentioned this before, but how the communists would divide in the school system, how the communists would divide students.
Mm-hmm.
The smartest students went into an A, they called it A class, right? So A is in the letter A, and they would get the math, the sciences, the chemistry. They would get the STEM education level, right?
Yes.
And then you'd have the B class, which were the kids that were not that smart. They were smart, but not probably about average.
Right.
Okay. And those kids would get the business and the I don't know, business classes or psychology. I don't know, something along those lines. And then you'd get the C class. They get to play outside.
Right.
Like they're going to be your workhorse. They're going to be your workers.
And what does this have to do with?
What I'm saying is, so the reason why they would do that, so your smartest people were in the same classes, and then typically, who are you going to pair with? Statistically, who are you going to?
Well, yeah, it just depends on how long they were breaking that up for, right? And then,
years.
But that doesn't remove for all the other variables like smoking while pregnant, nutrition while pregnant, all those other things, right? So that's why in the real world, that's not a real accurate study, right? But think about it with dogs, okay? We can breed dogs for intelligence.
It doesn't mean they're all going to be.
No. Right. But you drown the ones that are stupid.
And you still get stupid ones pop up.
Yeah, but then you kill them, and then eventually you get less and less dumb ones that pop up, and your baseline smart of intelligence goes up. That's how they do that. Okay, that's how they breed for traits in dogs, even intelligence.
Well,
they remove from the breeding population the ones that are dumb or the ones that don't have the trait that they want, and then your baseline goes up with that trait. And the same thing would happen in humans. It's just not okay to do that shit.
We'll look up the research on that.
Yep.
Because the research I was given from.
Yeah, again, though, but that's not controlling for all those variables.
It was research.
They were also. Yeah. It's not a study you could actually do. Okay. And nor should you. But I just don't know why humans would be unique in this out of other species.
They're really not, but it's really the cultural thing and societal thing that makes us not to want to select only for people who have useful traits as we determine them by our culture or society, rather see their usefulness merely as being humans, which separates us from animals.
Right. And we believe that choice should be made by the mates, right? Because that's what women do. And men too, right? They're picking their mates by selecting traits. They're selecting their mate based on what they think would make good parentage for their children. 1, good genes, 2, good support, things like that, right? So they're doing that.
Maybe.
Yeah, okay. Intelligent people are doing that. Average people, it is happening. That is how, even if they don't know that's why they're doing it, a lot of times that's why they're doing it.
Yeah, but across the board, it's not happening through every IQ range at a proportionate amount.
Right. But even then, it might be happening subconsciously.
Maybe.
Because dogs don't need to know that they're doing that when they're trying to
dogs don't care.
But animal species select for the best mate whenever they can. That's how evolution works. That's called sexual selection.
Wow.
Sexual selection, that's how it works. Okay? That's the whole point of sexual selection. Is it the mate that is the one being the selection is picking the best mate.
I'm pretty sure if you got a dog around 7 female dogs. And they
Yes,
all went
but
and
the
beat
female
different
controls that. You're not thinking about it right.
Uh,
The male doesn't control that in that situation. The female does. They can sit down and not let the dude breed it if they don't find it to be a satisfactory mate. And a lot of times in the nature, the way they ensure that the male is a satisfactory mate is the female just plays hard to get. And if the male can finally get her, then that means he was worth getting her. That's how deer do it. That's how elk do it. That's how a lot of these
you
animal
have a
species do it.
stubborn ass animal.
So
Right.
here's
But
the
that's
deal.
a trait that's good for evolutionary.
Natural selection is present in humans, and it really got a bad rap because of the Nazis, right? When they took it to the fullest extreme. So I just a couple things. Like, one, I didn't understand that you meant not breeding the Jews out of Europe, rather breeding their own people back into existence.
That was where my thought went with that.
As Hitler saw them. So I apologize for misunderstanding you, but they
No, it's fine.
they were doing that simultaneously with the Holocaust. They had their own breeding program. So second of all, to breed for intelligence, let's look at what intelligence means in this time at that place. Germany, age of eugenics. There's a lot of racial bias going on. Science is being used to prove racial bias. Shape of your skull determines intelligence, race determines intelligence, potential. The same way that like a very aggressive biblical archaeologist will set out and use their own work to prove the existence of something that may, not be factual. Okay,
right. They were throwing science out. Really,
science was being used to prove these racial theories that had their foundations in historical ignorance. Okay, so if you're breeding for intelligence, it really means usefulness to a society. And if you're kicking Einstein out of your society,
pause 1 second.
You're not recognizing true intelligence as being useful to your society.
But they weren't breeding for intelligence.
They would be breeding for intelligence that serves the purposes of the society. Which
and
is
I don't even think they were breeding for
ignorance.
intelligence at all, Matt. I think they were breeding for size. They were breeding for Germanness, right?
And really,
I don't think they were
like there were
awards.
There were awards rewarded to mothers who gave like 4 children and stuff like that. Like,
right, but I don't think they were breeding for intelligence. I just meant, what if he did? What if somebody like Hitler, who had the kind of power that he could have actually pulled that off, what if he actually tried to do that? And what would have happened to the world then?
Is China doing that right now?
You wonder, but I don't think they are, because I don't think they benefits.
They're playing the long game. If there's any country in the world that's playing the long game,
but they are
China.
not. But they also they're playing the long game, but they also have to keep their people down. When you're an authoritarian regime, you can play the long game, but you can't do it by building your people up. You can brainwash them, but you don't want them to be intelligent. You want them to be intelligent enough that they're useful.
You don't want them to be enlightened, right?
Yes,
you want them to be
intelligent enough that they're useful.
But controlled, right?
Eventually, if they're smart enough, you won't be able to control them, right?
There's
and I don't
a lot
think
to be said for that in the popular media and the news that we're fed nowadays.
Yeah, but since you bring up China, I don't think they're playing the long. They're not playing the long game anymore. And if they are playing the long game, they're screwed. Because as of right now, if you look at the Chinese population, it's majority male, almost the retirement age. So, and then because with the one-child policy, it's really starting to bite them in the ass.
Yeah, that's the.
So they're not really playing the long game.
Dude, that's what's so fascinating about this is we're talking about World War II here and the Nazi tidbits. No, I'm going to bring it to this. Russia is still feeling the effects of that giant loss to their population.
2 melon scoops.
Twice.
2 melon scoops.
In that 30-year span, plus all the Stalin shit, right? That's just now really going to fuck their population demographics.
Sure.
Okay, that's how long the history is. And so China's one-child policy is so much sooner than that. They might be really screwed too. I think there's a good chance they are. But maybe they're taking that into account and are going to plan on conquer places that have women. Because that's what you usually would have done historically. What? I mean, think about it, right?
I'm sorry. Conquer places that have women.
Well, that's what they did. Historically, when you were running low on women, if you didn't have good neighbors that were willing to trade with you, you would go conquering. that would do you the benefit of killing some of your males and also bringing in some new women, thus refreshing the DNA,
Sure.
the genetics, so that you didn't end up with kids with 3 arms. That's the thing
Yeah. I got
throughout human history. So maybe that's China's plan. I think that's not it.
They're just CRISPR.
It might be CRISPR. They're just going to make them all. Maybe they're just going to make a bunch
There's
of
literally
kids
like
in
news
labs.
articles about how they're using CRISPR to make super soldiers. Yeah, totally.
I'm not worried about super soldiers. I just think it's a bad idea to make.
Yeah, they have to get here first.
Right. Exactly. Well, see, that's a great point too, Matt. The Pacific Ocean is fucking huge.
You have those are great soldiers way on literally the opposite side of the planet. That's fantastic. You guys have fun.
Yeah, well, and it's funny. I mean,
although you're the closest over there, we're fine over here. There's no way they'd make it to Michigan.
I'm keeping an eye on them.
You keep an eye out for us.
What if they Red Dawn it? Just parachute right in the middle of the country.
Yeah. Well, they got that balloon over us.
Yeah.
Dude, I grew up watching Red Dawn and like playing Red Dawn in the old military bunkers outside my town, and like we were ready as kids. We were ready. So yeah, bring it on.
That's what's great about America, right? There's a bunch of pussies here, but there's still 400 million guns. Good luck, right? Good luck. Good luck. That's why, and that's what that book that we read by Paul Zehan.
Yep.
Okay, The End of the World is Just a Beginning. The fascinating aspect of that book was, if you don't sit there and think about it, you take it for granted how fucking blessed America really is.
To be isolated.
We have Canada and Mexico. Neither one of those countries is invading us.
No.
They're allies as good as you could get for countries like that, right? We're never going to have to worry about an invasion from Mexico again, Canada, okay? And then we have the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. In between all these rivers to make it easy to get troops around, and supplies and everything you need. Like, America is so safe from invasion, it's silly.
And the highway system.
Like, the only place that was really delicate or risky for invasion was Hawaii.
In Alaska.
Right, but exactly. So where there's nobody or nowhere near the main population. So that's why the Japanese hit Hawaii, right? Because it was the one part that would really be attackable.
How interesting would that be? So somebody invades Alaska and says, "Hey, Canada, we're just passing through to Washington State. We're just gonna go over the Yukon."
That'd be hilarious.
We're just gonna go over. Just
think of Belgium in the First World War when the Germans
Right.
tried to pass through Belgium, and they're like, "You guys just stay chill. We're going over to France. Like, all you have to do is not fight us." And they're like, "We are fighting you to the death."
Yep. Because you can't trust people when they say that shit.
No,
No.
of course not.
Because they're never telling the truth.
Well,
Like, if we're going to invade this other guy, we're definitely not going to invade you. We definitely don't want to stay here.
Just
We
let
don't
our
want
supply lines
Canada.
run through here. Yeah, just don't bother our soldiers.
You'll be fine.
Be cool. It'll all be fine. You'll be part of the new order.
I'm just not worried about a Chinese invasion. But
No.
what if they are using CRISPR to make a bunch of freaking
Cool.
really controlled?
Let them do push-ups on YouTube all they want, man.
Not soldiers, though. What if they're using it to make geniuses that can be controlled?
They don't really need to make that's scarier thing, and they already are infiltrating our universities and stealing our state
they're
secrets.
stealing all the good shit from our geniuses.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're just letting them.
So a really quick anecdote that illustrates this point. So when we were fighting against Slobodan Milosevic in the Balkans, right? Yugoslavia. I remember Bill Clinton. It was like his last military action, probably one of his only ones. He didn't respond to the bombing of the USS Cole, right? He just lobbed some cruise missiles at some aspirin factories and called it good. But in the Balkans, he went whole hog because he was under fire for Monica Lewinsky and he needed a diversion. So he went to war in the Balkans, right? So we're fighting Slobodan Milosevic and we have actual troops over there and, we have air cover and stuff like that. So we had a low flying F-117 fighter bomber, a stealth fighter, or stealth bomber that was flying in the daytime. Low altitude, right? A low altitude in the daytime, so it completely negates its stealth properties. And it was shot down by a local with an RPG, okay, or a shoulder-mounted missile weapon system of some sort. And so that dude, they shot down a stealth bomber. Okay, all right. That dude crashed. He got out of there. They made a movie loosely based on it called Behind Enemy Lines, starring Owen Wilson, which is actually pretty good. But okay, so that stealth technology remained on the ground, and then there are stories of immediately afterwards Chinese guys from the government going around the farmhouses. Hey, how's it going? You see that plane crash? Did you pick up any of it? Cool, we'll pay you for those remnants. Fast forward 20 years, an American diplomat is visiting China. Overhead flies an F-22, the exact copy of our newest F-22 stealth fighter with the stealth technology. It doesn't fly overhead. The press release comes out that same day. The diplomat looks at his phone, is like, wow, did you know about this? And the diplomat is like, I had no idea that happened. So they're doing everything from infiltrating our universities and stealing our tech to literally going door to door at farmhouses and picking up our junk and building stuff out of it.
And this is why we spend so much money trying to stay ahead.
Because
you got to remember, though, that F-17 stealth bomber,
that
shit was built in the 70s.
Yeah. That's true.
So
the F-35
the fact they finally got that 10 years ago.
F-35 will take down an F-22 any day, and
right. But if they only got that, and then that's the F-35. What are we sitting on?
Where's the F-23s through 34? And
and what are we sitting on? That's the F-40s. Because there's shit that we don't tell. They don't tell us about. All these
it's a constant
UFO
game, man.
Shit.
It's a constant game.
Spy planes. It's just like, so you're talking about.
Well, you don't need spy planes.
Look at the SR-71.
Amazing.
SR-71.
Dude, that was in the 60s.
I know.
Think about how bananas that is.
Who knew about an SR-71 before the 70s and 80s?
Right.
Before the 80s.
People thought it was a UFO. It's like,
man. The U-2 bomber was flying 80,000 feet in the air in the 50s.
Literally a flying sword.
Yeah, I mean, it's fucking crazy.
Still the fastest. Yeah, still the fastest.
Well, as far as we know.
Yeah.
I feel like there's no way it's actually the fastest, right? If it is the fastest, just because they decided, why would we need to go faster? You know what I mean? It's like, there's no way they couldn't have went faster. They might have just been like, well, that seems like that's enough.
At a certain point, you don't need to go fast, just be above and accurate and deflect. Yeah, totally.
Or you wonder, though, right? All this Pentagon stuff coming out now, and that David Grush
I just heard
a
great interview with him for like 3 hours. Yeah, man. Like
on Rogan?
I think so.
Rogan
he was
had
just
him.
recent.
What did you think of that when you came away from listening to him talk?
My main takeaway was that this man threw away his military career to become a whistleblower. He gave up. I forget exactly the term, but like he was in line to be a lieutenant colonel with the Air Force, and he gave up his officer's commission. Like you don't just do that for I'm going to write a book about this and be famous. No, dude, like you believe in something if you did that.
Yeah.
Maybe.
When I listened to that, though, he came across to me did come across as a believer. I think that's true.
It doesn't make it true. It makes it means
because he never saw anything himself.
Exactly. He's like, yeah, what if this guy's a dupe? And he's like, we just made this guy the biggest patsy in the world.
So adamantly.
Yeah.
When he never saw something with his own eyes.
It's a good point,
strange.
Man. Yeah.
That's all. Point. But we are way off topic. Well, actually, maybe that's not that far off topic.
I can bring it back home if you guys.
Well, because Nazi Tidbits is.
And that's another thing about why do we find the Nazis so fascinating? Is because they did develop advanced technology, and people still think they might be living on the moon. Like they might have developed UFOs, and
is that a thing? Is that one of those internet things I've never heard?
Yeah, the Nazi moon base. You never heard of the Nazi moon base?
Listen, I don't deep dive into these that much. That's a great
one.
There's
literally a movie like that.
Get on board with this one.
Literally a movie like that. It's called Iron Sky. Yeah.
Well, think about it, right? Who built the rockets that sent the people to the moon in the 60s?
Wait a minute.
Wernher von Braun.
Yeah, man.
Wernher von Braun. Yeah.
Maybe they were setting up bases. That is fucking funny. I never heard that one.
Astronaut. They didn't launch astronauts into the.
Okay.
What is a German word for astronaut?
I don't think there is one. Just say it with a German accent. That's good enough.
It would be
astronauts.
So Matt, now we're gonna end this Nazi tidbit discussion. I love it. This was fun. We're gonna go around favorite ridiculous internet conspiracies. Do you want a moment to think while I give you mine, or do you want to go first, Matt?
I need a moment to think.
Do you want to go, or you want me to give mine?
Go ahead.
My absolute favorite internet conspiracy, and I know you know this is coming, Scott, is Justin Trudeau is Fidel Castro's kid.
Wow.
Have you heard this one, Matt?
Yeah, I have.
Have
Yeah.
you looked at the pictures?
Yeah, they're very
Listen,
similar.
If they're not photoshopped, that's his kid. Now, maybe somebody photoshopped a bunch of pictures and threw them on the internet, and I don't know. That's possible. But if the pictures you see online of Fidel Castro and Justin Trudeau are not doctored, no fucking way that's not his kid. That's it. That's the one I believe the most is hilarious. I believe it. Unless somebody spent a lot of time doctoring a bunch of photos online, which is totally possible. There's some bored-ass people out there. But if those photos are real, Justin Trudeau is Fidel Castro's kid. And I wish somebody would make a podcast series where they sneak around and get some of his DNA, find some hair samples and shit, and then run the DNA and find out if there's any Cuban there. That would be fascinating.
Let's do that.
Since we're
Let's
going
force
with
him.
political leaders. You there, Matt? You good?
Yeah, he's just
I'm-
pulling
I'm
something
here.
up on the computer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. My favorite. There's two internet conspiracies, but the first one's, everybody knows this one. The Flat Earth Society.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
guys are idiots.
That is my absolute number one.
It's so dumb.
Come on.
It's so dumb.
The
But wait, we
documentary-
should check with Matt
Wait a
before
minute.
we start hitting
Wait a
on this.
minute.
Matt, the Earth's round, right?
I don't know. Probably the moon landing was faked.
No, pardon me. I meant Matt.
Oh, what?
The Earth's round, right? Before we
as-
shit on all these flat earthers, I want to make sure
Oh,
you're not one.
As far as I've been able to determine by my own scientific experiments, yes, the Earth is round. You know what I did? I placed a stick at one location, and I placed another stick far away at another location, and I had a person stand at that location, and I measured the shadow at a certain time of day, and I was able to determine that the light source is shining over a sphere. I'm sorry I didn't do that. That was the head of the Library of Alexandria, like 3,200
Oh, that's
years ago.
hilarious. I was like,
Yeah.
oh shit, Matt actually was doing experiments.
No, the best one.
Okay,
is
the flat earthers.
The flat earther is my number one because especially when they prove themselves wrong in that Netflix documentary.
That's so good.
Oh, absolutely hilarious. Now that's in the comedy section of Netflix. Anyway,
That's great.
so it's a mockumentary.
Yeah,
But
I'll have to watch that. I haven't watched that.
the other one, if we're talking about political figures, I'm gonna have to say Michael Obama.
Oh,
Oh,
Big Mike?
God, stop it.
dude, that's funny though. It's so ridiculous. It's
Yeah, that's
so
bad.
ridiculous.
How
That's bad.
hard would it be
Yeah,
to get
it's
a hair
offensive.
sample and run the DNA?
It's so ridiculous.
It just shows the hatred involved and the juvenile behavior of the other
well, that's
side.
what it
It's
is.
very
It just
bad.
shows
Yeah.
that people will believe anything.
Well,
Yeah.
what about Joan Rivers? Joan Rivers said that everybody knew that Michelle was a man.
Well, Joan Rivers
What?
was a very vulgar comedian who's actually
was.
hilarious.
So she might have
but
been
I-
joking.
She literally
I would
died.
not
She mysteriously died like a week or two later after saying that.
Anyway.
Okay,
There's
so,
your
so
internet conspiracy.
let's call that confirmed. All right.
Okay, Matt.
All right, go ahead.
The moon landing is yours.
Top of my head, I'll go moon landing just because it is huge, and I'd like to punch somebody in the face for saying it, just like one of the astronauts did when he was confronted by it. And there's this,
Oh, Buzz Aldrin.
there's political stuff involved with us bankrupting the Soviet Union by faking it, and Stanley Kubrick was involved, and there's the Van Allen belt, that the film would have been that we did go to the moon, but that the radiation spoiled the film, so we did have to fake it in our studios and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that one is pretty fucking funny too.
The nation spent a lot of treasure, many years and a lot of treasure getting men on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have a hard time believing. You know how one way, Matt, I would say that it's confirmed that we have landed on the moon is every year, actually multiple times a year, you can shoot a laser beam at a specific.
No, that's we calibrated a laser on it. I'm not saying that I believe in that. Yeah, trust me.
no,
I'm
on
saying
a
that
reflector.
people are
And it
ridiculous.
tells you
Yeah,
how
yeah.
far the moon
Yeah.
is compared
Yeah.
to the Earth.
We left equipment up there, like grab a telescope. You know.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best ones when they're that stupid.
Oh, we
Yeah.
crash landed.
But Matt, do you want to start a new podcast series with me about Fidel
Yes.
Castro and Justin Trudeau?
Yes.
We just
We're gonna
need to
get to the
go to
bottom of this.
Canada. We got to go to Canada, and we got to just like go to places where Trudeau stayed the day before
Well, wait a
and
minute.
find some hair samples.
George,
I'm dead serious, guys.
George,
This is $1 million podcast idea.
George and I actually discussed this and did a little bit of research on when Trudeau or when Castro visited Canada compared to when
No.
Justin Trudeau
When his parents were in Cuba,
or when Castro visited Canada.
allegedly swingers.
Allegedly.
There's a picture with her like hanging on Castro.
Allegedly.
If these pictures are not doctored, no fucking way that's not his kid. I don't buy it.
Allegedly.
That's why we got to get to the bottom of this. Matt's in. Are you in?
Yep.
I'm pretty sure we could. How would you do this?
Dude, people love these serial mystery, true crime
Yes,
and
they do.
stuff
We need-
podcasts.
You know what
We
needed
just
on
gotta
that board? We needed the dun dun.
Oh, that would have been good. Yeah, we got the soundboard now. We could really get one of these true crime kind of style podcasts going. All right, that's the new idea that we're gonna kick around. We're gonna solve this. All right, Matt. Anything else before we log off?
Can I kind of sum up with something?
Sure.
So we're talking about why we find the Nazis so fascinating, and I think that it is very particular to their time and the beliefs at work at that time. And I think that people forget that this was the advent of the theory of evolution really taking effect in society and changing people with eugenics. I think that something needed to replace religion. Can I just read something really quick?
Sure.
Okay, so when I was listening to this episode today, it reminded me of something that I wrote as an epigraph, which is an excerpt from a fictional book by a fictional character who is a professor of historical sociology and is talking about exactly this. He's talking about marshaling society for these kind of things, exactly this. And I just think that it would be so much easier if I just read it.
Sure.
The presentation and widespread acceptance of the theory of evolution can be seen as an apocalyptic force in the world. It subverted and destroyed many of the foundational tenets of religion that had previously acted as moral guides to societies. Thus, humans were forced to recreate their systems of morality from scratch based on the neurochemical factors of human nature, cultural influences at the time, and certainly a resentful backlash against thousands of years of religious oppression. Organized religions officiated by ordained priests were replaced with state cults of personality. National Socialism, i.e. Nazism, and Stalinist Soviet communism were political religions. They possessed all of the identifying traits of a religion: elitist inclusion into an inner party, idealization of a figurehead, excommunication, hierarchy, systems for penance and redemption, and rights to invoke psychological and emotional exaltation. In this, we see clearly how societies can be weaponized as instruments of worldwide mass destruction. The citizens of the world in the early and mid-20th century were witness to the greatest atrocities in human history. It skips ahead here really quickly. The time after the destruction of religion as a societal bond was usurped in a process that can be explained as nothing more complicated or noble than a power grab by conscientious and clever individuals who sensed the newly established connection to the animal nature of their fellow humans on a mass scale. What came of it, we have seen: the implementation by subconscious psychic will of a new species-wide morality, a bulwark against which to break the waves of violence, a waymark to judge all future potential dictators.
That was good, Matt. That's a good way to sum it up. And it's not just evolution either. It's natural science even more, right? When you get to the atom, when you get to science as far as we can break it down, it becomes harder to see God in things for humans, when before it was easy to see God in things. What makes the sun come up? Well, that's God.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So the more we have these scientific explanations for things, the harder it was to see the spiritual. And in most cultures, the religion was a way to kind of tame the savage the savagery, right? Not the Vikings, not the Germans, right? Not the pagans, but in a lot of cultures, especially, some of the Eastern cultures and then definitely the Judeo-Christian culture, right? That's kind of what it was. Trying to tame the warriors, right? When you lose that, you could unleash some pretty bad stuff. And that's what the last century was. Now, there's a good chance that that's not done. What is woke but a religion? And there's a chance that if they actually gain power, it would be similar to what the communists did. I really think
anything could be radicalized.
Mm-hmm.
Anything.
Well, especially when they try to recruit the radicals. That's what you're
Buddhists
going for.
Unleash sarin gas in the subways of Tokyo, right?
Right.
Buddhists did that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Any belief system can be radicalized.
Well, and where did I hear that from? It was like you think of it was some recent podcast or book or so. You think of the Eastern religions as these peaceful religions, and you're like, well, that's just because we don't live near them. That's not what they were.
Yeah.
They were also, those people also had warriors and had, all kinds of bad things they were doing. They weren't just meditating, right?
No, well, even now you have warrior monks.
Exactly.
That's what they are.
Exactly.
So, but all right, let's wrap this one up.
Yeah.
Right on, man.
Thanks, Matt. Again, guys, check the link in the description for the Discord channel that Matt runs for Hardcore History, and there's going to be another book event, Faithful Executioner, which is a book Dan's talked about in a couple of different podcasts, I believe. Scott, remember, guys, check out the link in the description for Ace Industrial Solutions for any industries that need solutions.
That's a good.
You can steal that tagline.
For any industries that need solutions.
Ace Industrial Solutions. You're welcome. See, this is why I should have went into advertising.